Take a long, hard look at the device you're holding in your hand right now. Whether it's a high-end smartphone, a sleek tablet, or even a basic calculator, it represents the pinnacle of decades of silicon evolution. But what if I told you that the most important journey in human history, a 238,000-mile leap into the absolute unknown, was guided by a brain that is, by every modern standard, laughably weak? This isn't just a nostalgic story about the moon landing. It is a clinical postmortem of a brutal, uncompromising era of engineering where failure wasn't an option because the hardware simply wouldn't allow it. Let's perform a comparison that borders on the insulting. Place your iPhone next to the Apollo Guidance Computer, or the AGC. Your phone operates in gigahertz, with billions of transistors etched into silicon at a scale so small it defies human comprehension. It handles gigabytes of data every second just to keep your social media apps running in the background. Now, look at the AGC. This was the machine that navigated the Eagle through the vacuum of space to the lunar surface. It possessed exactly 4 kilobytes of RAM and 72 kilobytes of ROM. To put that into a perspective that hits home, a single, grainy, low-resolution selfie you took this morning contains hundreds of times more data than the entire operating system of the Apollo 11 mission. Every line of code, every calculation for fuel consumption, every orbital maneuver, and every life support protocol was packed into a physical space smaller than a digital thumbnail. Yet, with a processing power that is less than 1/1,000th of your phone, NASA made the most audacious gamble in history. They bet the lives of 3 astronauts, the reputation of a superpower, and a journey of 238,000 miles on a device weaker than a modern digital watch. Why were they so confident? It wasn't about raw speed. It was about a cutthroat philosophy, survival through minimalism. How did a machine with such primitive resources navigate a hunk of metal to land precisely on a moving target in space? We are about to strip away the CGI and look at the raw, hand-woven logic that took us to the stars. This was a tactical nightmare, proving that when the stakes are infinite, the most powerful tool you have isn't the fastest one, it's the one that simply refuses to fail. This is stage 1, the loneliness of the void. To truly understand the pressure on this machine, you have to visualize the physics of the journey. Once the Saturn V rocket cleared the Earth's atmosphere and performed the translunar injection, the safety net of our planet began to evaporate. At 238,000 miles away, there is no cloud computing. There is no high-speed uplink for real-time ground support. There is only a silent, agonizing delay, a signal lag that feels like an eternity when you are hurtling through a vacuum at thousands of miles per hour. In space, a 3-second delay isn't just an inconvenience. It's a lethal gap where 1,000 variables can go wrong. Or, in that profound silence, the Apollo Guidance Computer isn't just a tool, it is your only teammate. It is the only thing standing between the crew and a permanent frozen orbit around the sun. Imagine the sheer weight placed on those 4 kilobytes of RAM. Every single second, the computer had to process complex orbital mechanics, tracking the position of the command module relative to a moon that is itself moving at over 2,000 miles per hour. It had to calculate the exact millisecond to fire the thrusters, measuring fuel burn down to the milligram, all while monitoring the oxygen levels and internal pressure of the cabin. There was zero room for a system update or a software crash. The memory overflowed. The mission didn't just stop, it ended in tragedy. The AGC had to be more than a computer. It had to be a guardian. Every byte of its memory was a precious resource, managed with a level of scrutiny that modern programmers can't even imagine. They weren't just writing code. They were crafting a digital ecosystem where every single bit had to justify its existence. This was the era of the verb-noun interface. Astronauts like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin didn't communicate with the machine through a touchscreen. They used numeric codes. You didn't click an icon, you punched in verb 37 to change the program or noun 63 to check the landing parameters. It was a cold binary conversation held in the dark between man and machine. Stage 2, the breaking point. It is July 20th, 1969. The lunar module, Eagle, has separated from the command module and is beginning its final descent. The jagged, cratered landscape of the Sea of Tranquility is rushing up to meet them. Fuel is dangerously low, the lunar dust is kicking up, and the tension inside the cramped cabin is thick enough to cut. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by a piercing yellow light on the console. Alarm 1201, then 1202. Look at the telemetry. In any other mission, in any other era of computing, this would be the end. This was an executive overflow alarm. It meant the computer was being flooded with more data than its tiny heart could handle. It was drowning. The rendezvous radar, which shouldn't have even been on during the landing, was dumping a stream of useless data into the AGC soaking up 15% of its total processing power. The computer was hitting 100% capacity. It was essentially crashing in the middle of the most critical maneuver in human history. But this is where the survivalist philosophy of NASA proved its worth. Most modern computers, when faced with an overload, simply freeze. They give you the blue screen of death. But the AGC was designed with a priority scheduling protocol, a software version of a battlefield medic. It recognized that it was dying, but it also knew what was vital for survival. In a split-second decision, the computer began ruthlessly killing non-essential programs. It stopped calculating the rendezvous data, or it stopped checking the secondary telemetry. It funneled every single ounce of its remaining power into the one thing that mattered, keeping the descent engine firing and the thrusters balanced. It was a scorched earth move. The computer sacrificed its own functionality to save the mission. Inside the cabin, Armstrong and Aldrin held their breath as the alarms continued to flash. But the engine kept firing. The computer was staying alive by the thinnest of margins, proving that when everything goes wrong, the ability to prioritize the mission over the machine is what separates a successful failure from a total catastrophe. But how did they build something so resilient? To understand the AGC's toughness, we have to travel back to the Raytheon factories in Waltham, Massachusetts. This is stage 3, the flashback. Look at the manufacturing floor. You won't see robotic arms or clean room silicon lithography. Instead, you see rows of women sitting at looms. These were the little old ladies, and they were the most important programmers in the world. They weren't typing code on keyboards, they were weaving it with their hands. This was core rope memory. The software for the Apollo missions was literally a physical tapestry. A copper wire passing through a magnetic ring was a 1. A wire passing around the ring was a 0. Every single instruction that guided the Eagle to the moon was a physical knot in a massive copper rope. It was a process of insane, agonizing precision. If a single wire was threaded through the wrong hole, the computer would miscalculate a burn, and the astronauts would die. It took weeks of manual labor to weave a single program, but the result was a piece of hardware that was indestructible. You couldn't delete the code. You couldn't corrupt the file. Once it was woven, it was a permanent physical fact. This was the AGC's secret weapon against the darkness of space. While modern software is a ghost in the machine, fragile and easily broken, the Apollo software was as real as the steel of the hull. It was a digital brain built with the durability of a medieval shield. This physical nature meant that even when the system was overloaded by the 1201 alarms, the underlying code remained untouched, uncorrupted, and ready to reboot in a fraction of a second. It was this hand-woven resilience that allowed the computer to survive the chaos of the descent and clear the path for those first historic steps. It wasn't just code, it was a testament to human craftsmanship, proving that sometimes the most sophisticated technology isn't found in a laboratory, but at the end of a copper thread. But this brings us to the ultimate twist in the story of the Apollo guidance computer. NASA had the budget to build a 300-foot rocket and the brilliance to invent entirely new alloys. Why did they settle for such a primitive, thimble-sized memory bank? By the late 1960s, the world was already moving toward more advanced, transistor-heavy integrated circuits. Silicon Valley was being born. So why stick with something that looked like it belonged in a textile mill rather than a spaceship? The answer lies in an invisible enemy that haunts the space between worlds. Once you leave the protective cocoon of Earth's magnetic field and pass through the Van Allen radiation belts, space ceases to be a peaceful vacuum. It becomes a high-velocity shooting gallery of high-energy particles, protons and heavy ions traveling at nearly the speed of light. When one of these particles strikes a modern, high-density silicon chip, it can cause what engineers call a single-event upset, or more commonly, a bit flip. Imagine a microscopic switch inside your computer. In a modern chip, those switches are so incredibly small and packed so tightly together that a single rogue proton has enough kinetic energy to knock a transistor from an off state to an on state. A 0 suddenly becomes a 1. In the comfort of your living room, bit flip might make your phone lag for a second or cause a weird glitch in a video game. But during a lunar descent, the stakes are fundamentally different. A bit flip in the wrong sector of memory could mean the difference between a controlled hover and a catastrophic engine shutdown. It could change a descend command into an abort command at the worst possible moment, or worse, it could corrupt the very logic the pilot needs to stay alive. This is where the genius of the AGC's primitive design reveals its true value. Because its memory wasn't stored as electrical charges in tiny, fragile silicon gates, But as physical copper wires passing through magnetic rings, it was virtually immune to the chaos of cosmic radiation. You could hit a core rope memory bank with a massive solar flare, and the code wouldn't change. It couldn't change. The software was a physical reality, hardwired into the very fabric of the hardware. To truly visualize this, think of a modern computer chip like a Formula One race car. It is a miracle of engineering, incredibly fast, optimized for peak performance, and capable of processing data at speeds the Apollo engineers couldn't have dreamed of. But a Formula One car is fragile. You take that car off the smooth asphalt of a racetrack and put it on a rocky, unpaved mountain road, a single pebble can shatter the suspension and leave you stranded. The AGC, on the other hand, was a Mark V tank. It was slow, it was loud, it was so. But you could drop a building on a tank and it would keep crawling forward through the mud. It was built for the terrain of deep space, not the sterile laboratory of a tech giant. It didn't care about processing power, it cared about physical survival. This challenges every modern doctrine we hold about technology. We have been conditioned to believe that more power, more speed, and more complexity always equal more success. We think we need 16 gigabytes of RAM just to browse the web, but NASA conquered the heavens and put boots on the lunar dust with only 4. They proved that in the most contested, high-stakes environments, complexity isn't a feature, it's a liability. The strongest system isn't always the one that can calculate the most digits of pi in a second. It's the one that simply refuses to fail when the entire universe is trying to tear it apart. Reliability isn't just a technical specification, it is a survival strategy. NASA realized that to touch the stars, they didn't need the fastest brain. They needed the most resilient one. They chose a physical certainty in an uncertain void, proving that sometimes looking backward at the rugged reliability of the past is the only way to move forward into the future. This shift in perspective, from raw power to rugged durability, isn't just a lesson for space travel. It's a fundamental truth about how we build the things that matter most. It reminds us that when the mission is critical, the value of a system isn't found in its peak performance, but in its floor of failure. For the men of Apollo, that floor was hand-woven, made of copper, and absolutely indestructible. It was a testament to the fact that the human spirit doesn't just build machines. It builds legends that can survive the most hostile environments in existence. The success of the Apollo missions wasn't just a triumph of physics or rocket propellant. It was a triumph of human restraint. It was the realization that silicon and speed are useless without the logic and the courage of the people who designed them. All the righteous. The Apollo guidance computer reminds us that we don't always need more power. We need better thinking. We need systems designed to fail gracefully. Machines that prioritize human life over their own perfection, and engineers who understand that the most powerful tool in the universe isn't a chip, it's the human mind. Sometimes the most effective tool you have isn't the fastest one. It's the one that simply refuses to break. We make these original videos from scratch, animated by human hands, to celebrate these forgotten engineering wonders that paved the way for the world we live in today. These aren't just technical curiosities, they are the blueprints for how we solve the impossible problems of tomorrow. So, ask yourself this. If you were heading to Mars tomorrow, and you had to bet your life on a piece of technology, what would you choose? A modern supercomputer that can glitch under the weight of a solar flare, or a hand-woven copper core brain that simply refuses to die? Let us know in the comments below. Do you value peak performance, or do you value absolute reliability? If you want to see more deep dives into the tactical nightmares and technical triumphs of history, hit that subscribe button, because out here in the dark, no one gets left behind.